Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Patryk Witkowski and I'll be reading you the news this evening. For the Ukraine update, we have day 922 of a conflict. Russia will make changes to its doctrine on the use of nuclear weapons in uh, in response to what it regards as Western escalation in the war in Ukraine. State media quoted Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov as saying on Sunday, "The existing nuclear doctrine set out in a decree by President Vladimir Putin in 2020 says Russia may use nuclear weapons in the event of a nuclear attack by an enemy or a conventional attack that threatens the existence of a state." Polish and Allied aircraft were activated early on Monday to ensure the safety of Polish airspace after Russia launched airstrikes on Ukraine, and operational command of the Polish armed forces said, "In the southeastern part of the country, there may be an increased noise level related to the commencement of operations in our airspace by Polish and Allied aircraft," the command said on X. Southeast Poland borders Ukraine. Ukraine carried out one of its biggest ever drone attacks on Russia overnight to Sunday, with videos showing a series of explosions and fires at power stations and refineries, including in Moscow. Russia's defense ministry played down the overnight strikes. It said it had intercepted and destroyed 158 unmanned enemy aerial vehicles. These were shot down over 15 regions, it claimed. Footage posted on Telegram channels suggested some of the long-range Ukrainian drones damaged targets deep inside Russia. At least one struck an oil refinery in Kapotnia district in southeast Moscow. More drones hit a thermal power station in the Tver region north of Moscow. There was an explosion in the Konakovo station, one of the biggest in Russia. An orange fireball engulfed several transformers. In eastern Ukraine, where the heaviest fighting of the war is concentrated, Russian forces continued to advance towards Pokrovsk, which is a vital military hub and transport link to towns and cities further north. At least 3 people were killed and 9 wounded in Russian shelling of Kurakov, a town 35 kilometers south of Pokrovsk, Ukrainian officials have said. At least 47 people, including 5 children, were injured on Sunday after Russian missiles struck a shopping mall and events complex in Ukraine's northeastern city of Kharkiv, officials have stated. The attack prompted Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to renew calls on allies to allow Kiev to fire Western-supplied missiles deeper into enemy territory and reduce the military threat posed by Russia. A Ukrainian helicopter on a military training flight crashed on Sunday, killing its 2-member crew, the Air Force's university said. Ukrainian forces shelled Russia's southern Belgorod region on Sunday, injuring 11 people, including 2 children who were seriously hurt, Regional Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov has stated. For our Israel and Gaza update, at least 40,786 Palestinian people have been killed and 94,224 injured in Gaza since the 7th of October, the Gaza Health Ministry said in a statement today. This included 48 people killed in the previous 24 hours. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, said 87,000 children in Gaza have received the first dose of a polio vaccine. UNRWA, the main channel for humanitarian support for Palestinians, said the polio vaccine is key to children's health, but stressed that what they need most is an immediate ceasefire. President Biden has said that a final deal for the release of hostages held by Hamas in Gaza was very close, but he did not think the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was doing enough to secure such an agreement. A major impasse in the negotiations has been the Philadelphia corridor along Gaza's border with Egypt and the Netzarim east-west corridor across the territory. Netanyahu is insisting that Israel retain control over these areas. Hamas official Sami Abu Zuri has said that Biden's comments were an acknowledgement by the US that Netanyahu was undermining efforts for them to reach a ceasefire agreement. Israel has had its first nationwide general strike since the Hamas attacks of the 7th of October, amid widespread public anger at the government's handling of a war in Gaza after the discovery of bodies of 6 hostages at the weekend. Israel's largest trade union, Histadrut, ordered a nationwide general strike from 6 a.m. today and brought large parts of the economy to a halt. Government and municipal offices were closed as well as schools and many private businesses. Israel's labor court ruled today that the general strike, which had been due to end at 1800 local time, must end by 14:30. Arnon Bar David, the chair of Histadrut, said he respects the decision by the labor court to end the strike. Hostages and Missing Families Forum, a hostage family organization, announced more than a dozen protest locations around the country, where demonstrators are expected to block traffic and demand that Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, agrees a hostage release deal. Locations are mostly major roads and intersections around Tel Aviv. The UK has moved to immediately suspend 30 arms export licenses to Israel after a review found a clear risk that UK arms may be used in serious violation of humanitarian law relating to the treatment of Palestinian detainees and the supply of aid to Gaza. The suspension will cover components for military aircraft, including fighter aircraft, helicopters, and drones. The Foreign Office said the 2-month review had raised concerns about the way Israel had conducted itself in the conflict in Gaza. The Foreign Office said that the scale of the destruction and the number of civilian deaths in Gaza was causing great concern. Action Aid UK has called on the UK government to suspend all arms licenses to Israel, warning that it is at risk of being complicit in the atrocities taking place in Gaza daily. CARE International's head of advocacy and policy for Israel, Dorothy Sange, said in a statement that the UK government's announcement to suspend 30 out of the 350 army licenses to Israel was a welcome improvement, but woefully inadequate. Shifting to Scotland, where the Scottish Government say that Programme for Government will deliver a wealthier, fairer and greener Scotland. First Minister John Swinney has announced that he intends to make a statement to the Scottish Parliament on Wednesday afternoon to coincide with the publication of his 2024-25 Programme for Government. The First Minister has said his plans will deliver a wealthier, fairer and greener Scotland, despite difficult financial challenges. First Minister will this week deliver his first programme for government since taking office, laying out how the Scottish Government will focus on improving the lives of the people of Scotland. First Minister John Swinney said the following: "Against a challenging financial backdrop, this year's programme for government will set out clear actions to deliver real change for the people of Scotland. The Prime Minister was clear last week that the UK budget to be delivered on October will be painful, and the reality is that UK's finances will inevitably affect the funding available to us here in Scotland. Their decisions mean tough decisions ahead for Scotland. Yet, despite this, the Scottish Government will continue to prioritise action to eradicate child poverty, to grasp the opportunities of delivering net zero, and to grow the economy by investing in public services and infrastructure. While we will work with the UK government wherever we can, we will continue to urge them to drop the damaging cuts and set new spending rules within the support investment. And make new spending rules that support investment. The Scottish Government already had a strong track record of improving lives in challenging circumstances. We have delivered an expansion of funded childcare, record investment in the NHS, renewable energy development, and the introduction of a Scottish Child Payment, which are strong foundations of this year's programme for government." John Swinney goes on to say, "Even when faced with unprecedented budgetary constraints, Our aim will be to improve people's lives by focusing on clear priorities that make the biggest difference. That was all from the First Minister discussing his program for government. Next, we have Jeremy Corbyn and 4 independent MPs forming the WM political group. Jeremy Corbyn is to form an official parliamentary alliance with... Oh, sorry. That's Jeremy Corbyn and 4 independent MPs to form a Westminster political group. The group is not called WM. My bad. Jeremy Corbyn is to form an official parliamentary alliance with 4 independent MPs who were elected on pro-Gaza platforms, issuing a call for more MPs to join. The group will have the same number of MPs as Reform UK and the Democratic Unionist Party, who each have 5 MPs, and more than the Green Party and Plaid Cymru on 4. Promising to fight austerity and campaign on issues including the winter fuel allowance, the 2-child benefit limit, and arms sales to Israel, the group also explicitly invites MPs to join them, a reference to 7 rebel Labour MPs suspended by the party for voting to axe the 2-child benefit cap. Corbyn, a former Labour leader, was elected as an independent MP for Islington North, after being barred from standing as a Labour candidate at the last election. The group will also include the MPs Shaukat Adam, Ayub Khan, Adnan Hussain, and Iqbal Mohammed. The MPs said, "We were elected by our constituents to provide hope in a parliament of despair. Already, this government has scrapped the winter fuel allowance for around 10 million pensioners, voted to keep the 2-child benefit cap, and ignored calls to end arms sales to Israel. Millions of people are crying out for a real alternative to austerity, inequality, and war, and their voices deserve to be heard." The Independent Alliance will not be a political party, but the grouping said it had formed so that the 5 MPs were allocated more parliamentary time to ask questions and speak in debates, operating in effect as a political party without a leader. A spokesperson for the Commons as Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, said a letter had been received but declined to say whether they would have any bearing on parliamentary time allocated. In a joint statement, the 5 MPs said they expected Hoyle would give them a similar number of speaking slots as other small parties, such as Nigel Farage's Reform, including being added to the rota for PMQs. Offshore Energies UK warns UK government windfall tax risks 35,000 North Sea jobs. North Sea industry has warned the government not to toughen its windfall tax on oil and gas profits in the autumn budget, claiming it risks losing £12 billion in tax receipts and jeopardizing 35,000 jobs. The industry's trade association, Offshore Energies UK, OEUK, has presented Treasury officials with data analysis that appears to show that the proposed changes to the tax regime would devastate the sector's predicted investment over the second half of this decade. The group said it had made the analysis public to help inform decision-making before the Chancellor's budget in October. Labour have pledged to toughen the windfall tax regime put in place by the previous government, known as the Energy Profits Levy, by raising the headline tax rate by 3 percentage points to 78%. It has also promised to close the loophole left by previous government that enabled oil and gas firms to reduce their taxes through investment allowances. The OEUK report says that trying to squeeze higher taxes from oil and gas profits would conversely lead to a £12 billion drop in tax receipts to the Treasury by wiping out new investments, and could prompt an overall loss in economic value of about £13 billion. OEUK said their investment slowdown could put 35,000 jobs at risk and may slash the forecasts for new oil and gas production volumes in the UK by 2/3. A separate report from UK Steel, which represents the steel-making sector, said that its members in the UK pay up to 50% more for their energy than competitors in France and Germany, owing to the UK's reliance on gas, which adds up to £37 million of electricity costs. The price disparity is predominantly driven by higher UK electricity market costs due to the high price of running gas power plants, and partly by greater network charges, according to UK Steel. It has called on the UK government to help cover the cost of using power networks and consider moving policy levies from electricity bills onto gas bills to make it more economic for steelmakers to run electric furnaces. Researchers say voters in England are beginning to think Tories are weird. Researchers say that conservative politicians have started to be seen as weird, and few members of the public, even including the party's own voters, are able to identify the Tory leadership candidates. Asking who had the best chance of winning the next election for the Tories, 70% of respondents either said they did not know or that they thought none of the candidates could win, with James Cleverly given the greatest chance on 8%, followed by Priti Patel. Multiple focus groups of former Tory voters suggested that those who switched their vote at the last election were not inclined to go back to the Conservatives anytime soon. Research by More in Common said the party struggled with reliability, particularly on Liberal Democrat areas, by focusing on topics which excite the base or the highly politically engaged, but were distant from ordinary people's lives. In a similar vein to the attack that US Democrats have leveled against Republicans, especially the vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, where research found there is a danger that the Conservatives had started to become seen as weird. It said that in seats won by the Lib Dems, voters would explain that they were voting Lib Dem in these traditionally Tory strongholds because Ed Davey's party just seemed more normal. The focus groups took place in July and August in constituencies including Surrey Heath, South Basildon, East Thurrock, Rother Valley, Henley, and Great Yarmouth. Research also included polling of the general public that found that Patel, former Home Secretary, was the only candidate more than half of people could correctly identify from a photo, even among those who voted for the Conservatives this year. Patel, Cleverly, and Kemi Badenoch were the only candidates more than half could correctly identify. Of the candidates who were introduced to the focus groups, which were shown video clips, Badenoch, a former business secretary, performed best, with those who switched to the Lib Dem and Reform, with the highest number saying they would be willing to give her a hearing and that she offered something new and different and refreshing. The candidate who was most likely by group was James Cleverly, another former Home Secretary. His ordinary background contrasting with that of multimillionaire Rishi Sunak, participants described him as friendly, plain-speaking, and approachable, and he seemed to have a laid-back character. Though a few participants were turned off by what they have heard as him having a reputation for off-color jokes. The former immigration minister Robert Jenrick, seen in Westminster as one of the front-runners to become Tory leader, received a relatively poor reception, described as smug, slimy, or wooden. Although some who switched to Reform said they agreed with his messaging. Patel, though the most recognized candidate, was also seen as one of the most divisive, with many focus group participants suggesting she had too much baggage, though she was praised by some Reform switchers. Former Security Minister Tom Tugendhat, that's a silent D, I see. Tom Tugendhat also received a reasonably positive reception, ranked as the most prime ministerial and as having more gravitas than any of the other candidates. He was particularly popular with those who switched to Labour and the Lib Dems, and his military service was popular with Reform voters. Pontins apologizes to Gypsy and traveler communities for discrimination. Pontins. Holiday park operator Pontins has issued an apology to Gypsy and traveler communities after an investigation by the equality watchdog uncovered discriminatory practices by the company. The Equality and Human Rights Commission, EHRC, served Pontins with an unlawful act notice in February after an investigation found practices aimed at barring Irish travelers from its holiday parks between 2013 and 2018. In response to the investigation, Pontins, which is owned by Britannia Jinky Jersey Limited, had apologized to the Gypsy and traveler communities and described its practices as clearly wrong. A spokesperson for Pontins said on Monday, on behalf of the owners, directors, senior managers, and all of us here at Pontins, we would like to reiterate our apologies regarding the serious issues raised by the EHRC in this report. In particular, we want to apologize directly to the traveler and Gypsy community for refusal to allow guests to stay to our parks because we suspected that they were Irish travelers was clearly wrong. The spokesperson added, "We accept the serious nature of the issues raised in the report. We deeply regret any distress caused, particularly to members of the traveler and Gypsy community who have been directly affected." The findings of the AHRC investigation, which was published earlier this year, found Pontins had been involved in 11 unlawful acts, including retaining a list of Irish surnames titled as undesirable guests, monitoring calls, as well as refusing or cancelling bookings made by people with an Irish accent or surname. The Commission also found Pontins introduced rules requiring guests to appear on the electoral register. This was deemed a disguised form of discrimination against Gypsies and travelers, as such communities are less likely to be on registers, according to the EHRC. The apology issued by Pontins marks the first step of the action plan developed and monitored by the EHRC to tackle race discrimination against Irish travelers. The plan will include monitoring Pontins' booking policies, the introduction of safeguards in systems and processes, a whistleblower action plan, and engagement with traveler communities. Scholz urges German parties to exclude far right after AfD state election results. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has urged mainstream parties to exclude right-wing extremists after preliminary results showed the far-right alternative for Deutschland, AfD, had come top in a state election, while a new populist force in the left established a firm foothold in the country's political landscape. Voters in two closely watched elections in the former communist East made clear their dissatisfaction with Germany's mainstream political parties, putting the AfD in the top spot in Thuringia, in Thuringia with 32.8% of the vote. The second place in Saxony with 30.6%, according to preliminary results. Scholz called the results bitter and worrying. Our country cannot and must not get used to this. The AfD is damaging Germany. It is weakening the economy, dividing society, and ruining our country's reputation, Scholz said, adding that the most dire predictions that his center-left Social Democrats, SPD, might fall out of a state parliament for the first time had not materialized. To say that again, Scholz said, and he added that the most dire predictions, that is center-left Social Democrats, SPD, might fall out of state parliament for the first time, had not materialized. The 11-year-old AfD clinched its first mayoral and district government posts last year, but has never joined a state government. The remaining Democratic parties have vowed to maintain a firewall of opposition to working with AfD, keeping it out of power. Results in Saxony and Thuringia proved disastrous for the three ruling parties in Scholz's center-left led federal government, each scoring single-digit percentage shares of a vote in both states 1 year before Germany holds its next general election. In America, Trump is ridiculed after accusing Kamala Harris of mistreating Mike Pence. Donald Trump has drawn ridicule and accusations of hypocrisy after accusing Kamala Harris of mistreating his former vice president, Mike Pence, despite Trump supporters saying Pence should be hanged during the January 6th insurrection that he incited. Trump's comments came in an interview with Fox News, when he also singled out Harris's 2018 cross-examination of Brett Kavanaugh during Senate confirmation hearings after Trump nominated him as the justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. Trump told the interviewer, Mark Levin, the way she treated Mike Pence was horrible. The way she treats people is horrible. The way she treated Justice Kavanaugh in the hearing in the history of Congress. Nobody's been treated like that. Trump's comments prompted a response from Harris's campaign by suggesting that 78-year-old Trump is in mental decline. Trump's comments evoked social media references to his notorious treatment of Pence after his presidential election defeat to Biden, when he tried to pressure the vice president into refusing to certify the results in Congress, as dictated by the U.S. Constitution, and then egged on a mob to attack the U.S. Capitol while Pence was inside. His allusion to her treatment of Kavanaugh, one of three conservative justices Trump appointed to America's highest court, referred to Harris's question to him over abortion at the 2018 confirmation hearing, which took place when she was senator. Can you give me any laws that give government the power to make decisions about the male body? Harris asked Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh hesitated before admitting that he could not think of any right now. Coming back to Scotland, where there's an end of putting under 18s in young offenders institutions in Scotland. All under 18s who were previously detained in the Polmont Youth Offenders Institution have now been moved into secure care settings. New regulations came into force on the 28th of August, and as of that date, there will be no new admissions of children into under 18s into YOIs. Funding of up to youth offenders institutions, funding of up to £7 million is being made available by the Scottish Government to cover the costs of placements this financial year. This is in addition to £500,000 funding, which has been offered to secure accommodation providers to support their preparations for the movement of children, ensuring their well-being and safety is a top priority. As part of a wider work to embed the United Nations Convention on the Human Rights of Child and to keep the promise, the 2024 Children Care and Justice Scotland Act's provisions aim to improve children's experiences in care and justice systems, whether as victims, witnesses, or children who have caused harm. In general, these are meant to improve children's experiences of the care system, whether they be victims, witnesses, or children who have caused the harm. Ministers for the Promise, Natalie Dawn Innes, said, "We have been moving at pace since the Children Care and Justice Scotland Bill received royal assent in June to implement this reform and ensure no under 18s will be detained in a young offenders institution from now on, moving to suitable settings such as secure care. This move will ensure children in conflict with the law are placed in safe, suitable accommodation, which will ensure their well-being and rehabilitation at the heart of their care, and will also keep our communities safe." Next story is the second mother and child recovery house opens in Scotland. A second residential rehabilitation service to support women and their children for recovery from addiction, substance use, has opened in Falkirk. The Scottish Government has invested £5.5 million to support the development of Aberlour Childcare Trust Facility. That's Aberlour Childcare Trust Facility, as well as a house in Dundee, which opened in January 2023. The houses offer 24/7 support and keep families together by letting children of women with problematic substance use stay with their mothers during their recovery. Wellbeing Minister Mary Todd said this house will allow women to access residential rehabilitation services and keep their families together, said Minister Mary Todd. We know there is a strong link between women having children removed from their care and risk of drug-related deaths. Treatment is more effective when families are kept together, and it also reduces the harmful impact on children. Widening access to residential rehabilitation is a key part of our national mission on drugs. We have made £100 million available for residential rehabilitation from 2021 to 2026 to ensure 1,000 people receive public funding for their replacement each year by then. That included £38 million as part of our commitment to increase the number of beds to 650. Next up, we have a Viking vessel from Galloway Hoard revealed to originate from Iran. On the 10th anniversary of its discovery, new research and conservation has revealed the West Asian origin of a lidded vessel, which contained many of the unique treasures that comprise the Viking Age Galloway Hoard, and which will go on public display for the first time later this month. On its discovery, the vessel was found wrapped in textiles, which in themselves are an extremely rare survival from the burial of the Hoard around 900 AD in Galloway, in the southeast of Scotland. These textiles have been carefully studied and retained for further analysis, with as much as possible preserved in situ. Yeah, that's Galloway, southwest of Scotland. Those textiles have been carefully studied and retained for further analysis, with as much as possible preserved in situ on vessel. This delicate balance of careful conservation work and research has revealed the intricately decorated surface of the vessel for the first time since it was put in the ground over 1,000 years ago, where the surface of a vessel had previously only been viewed for X-ray scans. Laser cleaning has helped to reveal further details of its design, including crowns, fire altars, leopards, and tigers. This remarkable imagery is unusual in Western Europe and suggested an association with iconography of Zoroastrianism, the state religion of the Sasanian Empire, the last Iranian empire before the early Muslim conquests of the 7th, 8th centuries AD. New scientific analysis has confirmed the materials used to make the vessel originated in what is now central Iran. We will play a video about the restoration, but first I will give you the usual reminder of Broadcasting Scotland, depending on the generosity of all of its supporters. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. And to everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make regular monthly payments, thank you very much. Right now, we urgently need to increase our donation if we are to be able to pay our bills. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but our income is just over £2,000, and we are now facing mounting debts. Please donate whatever you can afford. I've been Patryk Witkowski, reading the news for you today. Goodbye, I thank you for watching, and please enjoy this video.
I'm Martin Goldberg. I'm Principal Curator of Medieval Archaeology and History at National Museum Scotland. This is the last of our major reveals from the Galloway Hoard research programme. This is the lidded vessel that has always sat at the very heart of the hoard and contained all of the most unusual and exotic items. So this object has been on a long journey over the last 10 years. This is not what it looked like when it came out of the ground. But what you can see are the preserved remnants of the very fragile archaeological textiles that wrapped this vessel when it went into the ground 1,000 years ago. Our first step in investigating the vessel was to have it 3D scanned so that we could try and see the decorated surface underneath those archaeological textiles. Our job is to both preserve it but also to do research on it. We wanted to record and identify the textiles, but then the process of cleaning begins in order to reveal what we can of the decorated surface. So the technique that we used was laser cleaning, and this allowed us to remove the green corrosion that was covering a lot of the silver surface of the vessel, but also helped us to preserve the textiles that were adhering to the surface. So we were striking that careful balance between revealing and preservation. What we can now see on the decorated surface has enhanced that initial glimpse that we had from our 3D scans. We can see the Zoroastrian iconography that we first identified. The Zoroastrian iconography is inspired by the state religion of the Sasanian Empire that was centered on modern-day Iran. That includes things like the fire stand and also some of the exotic creatures that we can see that look like leopards and tigers. But what that tells us is that this vessel has traveled thousands of miles to get to Galloway and is very, very far away from where we would expect to find something like this. Further research using scientific techniques has looked at the origins of the silver and the niello inlay on the vessel, and this has allowed us to get even closer to the origin of where this vessel came from. The lead isotope signature of the metals that have made this vessel have been pinpointed to a mine that is in modern-day Iran, so that fits perfectly with our theory that this comes, or was certainly inspired by the iconography of the Sasanian Empire. So people will be able to see this object on display for the very first time in the British Museum's Silk Roads exhibition from the 26th of September.